it took me a while to realize that I was going through mental health challenges. Regardless of how, life was, I was always a very happy person. I was also always a very optimistic person. I have a lot of energy, and that energy comes off when I'm talking. And suddenly, I felt like the energy drain out of me. I started setting small goals for myself. I said, okay, tomorrow I'm going to come back from work and go for a walk. I would set weekly goals for myself. Inside, I never felt like I could do it. I never felt like I could be a co-founder. I never felt that I could even get investors.
When we usually talk to entrepreneurs, we hear the stories about the grand dreams to build something big, about the desire to make a dent. Fatima Mazhar grew up in a conservative Pakistani family where every decision in her life was taken for her, where there was no room for pursuing that dream, building that big thing for a good girl. How do you deal with the conflict of wanting to do something exciting and impactful, but you're held back by the shackles of your cultural context? Fatima started rebelling, did things that were considered rude and inappropriate, whereas had she been a man or in the Western world, everybody would have applauded it. Leaving a well-paid job in investment banking to join a startup at a fraction of her salary, putting her career on hold for further education, and then joining a new business as a co-founder, all the things were not things a young Pakistani woman does. The conflict between wanting to do what is good for you and what is expected from you took a real toll on Fatima's physical and emotional well-being. It took a while for her to acknowledge that she was severely depressed, neglecting herself, withdrawing from people, acting in self-destructive ways. It all changed when Fatima started seeing a therapist and started working on herself. Key to get through what felt like an enormous challenge was to take it in very small and manageable steps. Fatima shares with us how she has now a much healthier relationship with her parents, is more confident in saying no to the things that aren't good for her, and how she feels better equipped with the challenges of building and running her business. Please meet Fatima.
This is Naked by the Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. Brought to you by Vladimir Skobrestinska and Nectarios Lolios. And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help us share it with the world.
Fatima, welcome on Naked. We're glad to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. A bit nervous, but very excited to be here.
Hi, Fatima. No need to be nervous.
Hi.
To be honest, I'm also a little bit, I can feel it in my stomach. I'm thinking it's probably because it's our first recording after we had a holidays, a little break and the New Year's and everything. And I felt it today. But I think, Fatima, it's also because of you for me. And the reason, guys, is because, so Fatima is a very special person, especially for me. So I asked Nectarios if I can do the intro. It's usually swapped depending on the relationships. And so for me, today is very special because as you everybody knows, so I do spend a lot of time these days in Pakistan. So it sort of became one of my homes. And one of the questions, Fatima, that I get a lot is, so how is it in Pakistan and building businesses in Pakistan? And I have my own view, but I was thinking how to start this conversation today. And I really appreciate that you are sort of, ready to be naked with us and talk about the other side of entrepreneurship. But I felt like, let's start from the bigger picture. So how is it to build businesses, to be an entrepreneur in Pakistan? And I think also I don't want to sort of overlook the part of your identity of being a woman. So maybe if we mix those pieces together, how's the experience for people who have no clue, no idea?
Okay, so the experience is great. At least I think for myself as a Pakistani, it's great for everyone else as well. But I think what's great about building a business in Pakistan is people are super helpful. So you've got a great support system, whether it's friends, family, other people chipping in. I have had, I remember when I was building out the Kareem team here, I spoke to my family and I said, hey, I haven't been in Pakistan for this long. I've just moved back to launch Kareem. Can you help me out? I got all sorts of people coming in. I remember I had an event where I said, oh, I need to do this. So people started chipping in, all sorts of people started chipping in, friends brought friends, and the event happened without the number of people that we needed. Other than that, I think there's a misconception maybe about like how things are not really straight here, or like one thing I really hear is, that things are really corrupt. But if you've decided that you want to play it by the rules and you want to do everything right, you can do it. I've done it every single time. I'm one of the few taxpayers in the country. I've heard there are very few. I've always registered my business whenever I wanted to do stuff. And all of this is really easy, especially now. Over the last few years, the ease of doing business in Pakistan, our ranking's gone up significantly because it is something that we're looking after. And I think a lot of the money that's come in wouldn't have come in if it wasn't the case here that it's easy to do. And a lot of times, at the heart of it, what is really important is getting good talent. And there is an abundance of good talent. You have to find it. It's not easy to find. And you have to train it and kind of get it up there. But there's so many people in this country that are looking to do good work, that one thing that I've never had a shortage of is finding talent. You know what I mean? And I think one of the mistakes that people make is they go to the best universities in the country and they're like, oh, let's get people from here. And of course, that's where you feel a little bit of a shortage. But honestly speaking, we have some of the best coders, some of the best engineers that are here. And at the tech revolution that's happening in Pakistan, it's the best place to come do business. So all of you, I encourage you to come do business in Pakistan. You'd be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah,
sponsored by the Pakistani Chamber of Commerce. I mean, people don't realize it's a 250 million people, right?
Yeah.
So it's an enormous size of the population.
Right? It is. And you said that part around the myths. And I think I would so, agree with that. Like, I think we just have this sort of one view, often very narrow and black and white, very binary view of the region, of the country, knowing very little about it. So I think it's really good to hear, and thanks for sharing some of the good stuff, some of the highlights. So let's go a little deeper and a little bit personal. So we sort of deep dive maybe two layers now deeper. So we know, because we chatted before, so there was a lot of impact of your upbringing on sort of your decisions in life, and also on the decision of sort of becoming part of the business scene and become a company builder and co-founder, and all the roles that you've had. You wear a lot of hats. So let's go there a little bit. So tell us a little bit how the upbringing has impacted who Fatima is today.
Okay. So for all the people who are listening, if you're Pakistani or if you're from, South Asia, you might understand this. For all of the others, I'm sorry if you don't understand this, but I'll try to make you understand it. I am from a Pakistani family, which is middle class. I think halfway conservative, halfway maybe not conservative, but relatively to the more conservative side. And I grew up knowing that I was going to get educated, I was going to get married, and I was going to maybe have babies. And that was the idea that I had. That's the idea that everyone has. Till about I went to college, and I'll dive a little deeper into that. All the decisions that were made about my life were not made by me. They were made by my parents. They were made maybe in collaboration with my grandparents. Shout out to my mom, who is one of the best people in the world. Oh my God. I mean, not that I don't love my dad, but you'll understand why I love her so much. So growing up, I realized I was a little different because I started riding horses. So my mom put both me and my brother to ride horses. And this is relevant. This is why I'm saying that there. And my brother did not like it, so he didn't continue, but I did. I still ride. I play polo.
Yes,
there.
we can see Fatima is just showing us her polo gallery behind her,
Sorry.
which we can see. So it's massively beautiful.
Sorry. So I play polo, and so my mom decided that both my brother and I will go for riding, but there were certain questions about whether I should be riding or not, whether it is a good idea for me to ride or not. So, but you know, she stuck with it and I stuck with it. But important to note, my brother did not enjoy it and he didn't. I also was one of the people that my dad was in the army, we moved a lot. So I never really stayed in one place. Every 2 years, we moved to a new city, new school, new friends. I picked up gymnastics. I was the only girl that was doing gymnastics, except for this one other cool girl. I'll never forget her, grade 4. And then as we went forward, I was the only girl that was doing karate. And you know, there was other people doing all sorts of other things, but this is what interested me. And so one fine day, my dad got posted to the US and I was in Pakistan. I just finished my A-levels and I'd started, you know, university in Pakistan when my dad said, hey, I'm moving to the US. He was posted as a defense attaché or something in the US from the army. And I said, I don't really want to move. And they're like, you have no choice. We're moving, so you're moving. Long story short, my dad decided that I was moving and he spoke to a friend who decided which college I would go to because they knew somebody there and they said, apply. Luckily, I also applied and got a scholarship and, you know, the school turned out right, but that's how I chose my university. It was because my dad told his dentist that, you know, we're going to the US, where should she go to school? And he decided. Obviously at that point in time, I'm 40 years old. So back in 1999, internet wasn't such a big thing. So we didn't really know schools, but we did know there were some good schools, but I had no plans of going. And honestly speaking, I did not want to go. Just like that, when it was time to do my master's, it was decided that I was going to do my master's based on what my advisor, who was my dad's friend in school, said. Where would I go? No idea. I just, you know, he said either do your master's or get married. And I said, oh, I don't really think I want to get married, so I'll just do my master's. Luckily enough, my parents were really big on education. That's how most of my decisions were made. That's how my undergrad school was chosen. That's how my grad school was chosen. The only choice I had was what sport I was going to pick up. Because my, you know, parents had decided in O-levels that I wasn't really that smart. So they put me in an all arts school, which meant that I did not have any of these science subjects. Props to them. It was the best school for women in Pakistan. So I'm not taking anything away from them. But all of these decisions were kind of made without keeping me in mind. And I'm not saying they did anything wrong. I'm just saying that's the way it was. So I grew up till I was 22, 23 when I graduated from my master's, having no idea what I wanted to do in life. And then, you know, I couldn't really get a job in the US because I needed like that H-1B visa. So I moved to Dubai, where my parents were at that point in time. And, you know, decided to get a job in investment banking because that's what...
Was that also based on some, you know, like what it's supposed to be, or other people's expectations?
So my brother was doing finance. He was doing well in finance. He actually had the option of finishing his undergrad. He's younger. And he insisted that he wanted to take a break, that he wanted to do his MBA later, but he wanted to work, and you couldn't get into an MBA degree without, you know, work experience. And I also wanted to do my MBA, but I was decided, let's do a master's. So yeah, finance is what my brother said would be a good thing to do. And I decided, okay, let me try in finance. So I started working in finance.
Okay, hold on there. I was just like, there is so much in there already, but Nectarius, go first.
Okay, cool. No, it's well, first of all, it's fascinating to hear you talk about going through life without having to make a decision, which for some people might actually be a good thing because a lot of people are overwhelmed by choice, right? But I understand what you're saying. When you started with saying for Pakistanis and South Asians, you get me, and the rest, I apologize if you don't, a lot of people will get you. It might not necessarily be as rigid, but growing up in a Greek culture, growing up in a Greek immigrant culture in Germany, right? Or my Jewish friends who were, so cultures of family.
Yeah.
So my partner. So my partner's Malaysian. So my Malaysian friends, it's very clear that if you're Chinese Malaysian, there's only 3 jobs that are available to you, which is either a lawyer or a doctor, or maybe an accountant or engineer, but that's already a little bit exotic, right? So we hear you loud and clear, Fatima.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was curious, Fatima, do you remember, how did you cope with that situation at that age? Just, what was the way to go through those emotions? What were the emotions at the time when decisions were made for you? I mean, you were in your teenage years, just entering in a young woman, really.
So I think when I look back at it, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? But we're so conditioned. We are so conditioned that this is the way it's going to be, that I felt like, okay, this is the way to go. I think there's a few decisions where I didn't agree, but I don't even think I had the ability to have a voice to say something. You're taught, it's the culture. It's not only my parents. You're taught, it's the culture that, how to be a good daughter is to listen to what is said. How to be a good daughter is to get good grades, be with the family always. Don't bring any shame to the family. Don't date because that brings shame to the family. Don't be seen sitting in certain ways because that brings shame to the family. Wear clothes that don't bring shame to the family. And most of the time it's there's a word in Urdu called izzat, which I think this is the biggest debate I have with a lot of people now, that how is it that my actions will define the honor of my family? My family's moved on from that point and my parents are great now, but it has taken some work. And my mom was always very progressive. She was one woman that did not wear sleeveless. She was one woman that was not very outgoing, but she had, or she still does, she's sitting downstairs somewhere there. She has great vision. She said, Fatma, I did not work and I regret that decision day in, day out. So if there's one thing I want you to do, it's for you to have your own job and be independent, because women, if not independent, are a liability. I think that was the most beautiful thing she said. And she said it to me while I was getting educated. I was sent to boarding school, FYI. I think I skipped that part. I absolutely hated each and every day of boarding school. I was bullied in boarding school. I developed all sorts of like attention craving things in boarding school. I would lie to get attention just because I was just so miserable. But it was the best school in Pakistan. It gave me the platform I needed to go get into better schools. But she had that vision. And so I always say everything I am, and I don't say it to her face, because again, in our family, we don't show affection. I don't know why. We show it to my sister who's autistic. We show it to my nieces and nephews now, but to each other. And you know what? I've talked about this a lot recently with people here. And it seems like from my generation and the generation above, maybe in army families somewhere, or elsewhere, affection is not a thing. I still don't hug my mom. It was her birthday the other day. I hugged her. 1st January was her birthday. So I finally gave her a hug and she's like, oh, get off me. Like, what are you doing? I don't hug my dad. When we meet, we say hi. So that to me, I think, and when you see it elsewhere, I feel like, I don't say it to them and I hope they never listen to this, but I feel like that caused a lot of issues because I was known as the person who hugged the most everywhere. And I think there's a lot that stems from that. In that. So I think if I am ever a parent, which I don't plan to be, but if I ever am, if that's in the plans, I'd go overboard with affection. I do with my sister, I do with my nieces, I do with all my friends.
I hear you. Yeah, we don't say I love you in my family. We were just recently talking about it with Nadeem as well, is that they are not super outspoken in their family, but he's with his own children right now. But I was like, in my family, we hug, but we don't say I love you. The word love is like, I get like feeling of weird shame or embarrassment, I think. It's just mix of,
that's it.
And Nectari's working. So I guess you share.
So my dad passed away 3 years ago. And we used to have this neighbor who was the cab driver. It was a cab driver, but every time we needed a cab, we would use him. So my dad passes away. I visit Greece the first time after he was gone. So I, of course, called the family driver. And in the car, the driver, a friend, would tell me how my dad wouldn't shut up talking about me. And I was sitting there thinking, on the one side, I had this big lump in my throat. On the other side, I was thinking, I wish he would have said one of those things ever to my face.
To you. Yeah.
So there's this thing about there was an implicit affection. And of course, you never questioned their love, but it was never explicit. other people would know more about how they felt about their children than their own children would.
That is
Right?
very true. I hear it from people as well. I've seen my dad do this. He will be sitting with, it's embarrassing as well, by the way. That's more embarrassing. He'd be like, you know what she's doing? She's doing great. But I feel like that's very recent. I think my relationship with my dad has been horrendous. And I can speak about it now because now we're in a good place. Even today I was talking to him and I was like, I know you love me. And he's like, huh. I was like, no, say it. And I made him say it. So now I'm getting more comfortable with it. Now we have a really good relationship. But I think they say that, you know, relationships don't take work. But oh my God, I think the biggest challenge is when this generation gap happens and you don't realize how much of it affects you in other ways. I am a happier person right now when everything's good with my parents. I'm happier at work. I'm happier in life. There's literally no drama in my life in the past few years when I've worked really hard to mend fences with my dad. More.
And we could talk, I would be curious to go at some point deeper into that, like, you know, what type of work it required and what did it entail. But going back to sort of your, I think there's something in there that Nectar has also said that a lot of us can relate to, which is that decision in some way that we didn't even make actually, or some of us made decisions, but they were really heavily influenced by others and their expectations, whether it's our parents or wider society and stuff. So what I've heard from you, Fatima, feels like it nearly felt as if it's a right way to do what my parents sort of feel is the right path. So was there an inner conflict in you? Because I remember myself where I wanted to go on a master's of human rights and my dad was like, what are you doing with your life? Like, what an option is this? And I remember crying it out and I felt like completely lost in the middle. But then I pushed through anyhow. But so I'm curious, like, what was there a battle or when that Fatima started sort of cleaning up herself from those expectations and layers? Tell us a little bit more about this.
So I think it started, so I was getting educated in the US, right? And I met all sorts of people and I saw them making these decisions and I couldn't even make a decision or pick like a subject without talking to my parents and be like, hey, I'm picking this. Hey, this is what I got in my result. And, you know, your parents pay for college. In Pakistan, your parents pay for everything. So even if you have a question or even if you have a doubt, you quash it because they're doing so much for you. And I realized that more once I went to the US and all these people had taken student loans and they were doing jobs and I, you know, wasn't doing a job. I eventually had to because my parents, because my father didn't understand, or I also couldn't tell him how much you have, what kind of money you need to have, because I was the first one in my family, first girl in my family and the third person in my family that had gone abroad, right? So I started working, but I appreciated them a lot because essentially they were doing what a lot of the other families weren't doing. And so I think it didn't start, my questioning or what they call my rebellious nature did not start until I lost my job in Dubai because 2008, there was this global financial crisis. I was working in, you know, an investment bank, and I was let go or made redundant. Sorry, I'm supposed to say I was made redundant because they kept telling me you weren't let go. And I, you know, I was at that situation where I'm like, what do I do now? But by that time, I'd studied abroad. I'd, you know, gotten a master's degree. I'd gotten enough exposure, and I was like, okay, now this is on me. Because I didn't want my dad to be helping me out. I didn't want him to have to pay for anything. Honestly speaking, my dad still, like, till my 30s, helped me out any way that he could. And I feel like sometimes maybe parents help out after you can help yourself so that they can have some level of control. I think it's really hard for parents to let go of that control and for you to reclaim your life. I remember when I moved back to Pakistan, I would make certain decisions and my dad would be like, oh, So now you're old enough to make your own decisions. You don't need us anymore. Again, nothing on them. I'm not saying they're bad parents. I'm just saying that it is believed that at least a Pakistani girl, till she's married, is always going to be their little girl. But I've heard now from multiple people that no matter how old you are, you're always going to be your parents' children, and they'll always try to interfere is a bad word, but kind of interfere in your decisions in your life. And so I needed to decide how much I was going to allow that. So I think once I lost my job in Dubai, I was like, okay, what do I do next? There also, my dad kind of helped me. He put me in touch with a few people. And one of those people was like, hey, I interned with you before. Why don't you come work with me? Again, this was a situation where I was working with somebody that my dad knew. And so a lot of the times, if I wanted to say something, I couldn't, because again, this person knows my dad, and maybe he didn't hire me for me, but he hired me because maybe like there was all sorts of conflict in my head. Yeah. I did work with this person for a while, but then after that is when I decided, okay, now I'm going to see what I enjoy doing, and I'm going to do it regardless of what it is. And that's when, Kareem happened, and then MIT happened, and then Keep Trucking happened.
It just feels like it happened, but it didn't just happen.
No, it didn't just happen. Then there's a lot of trials.
Okay. We talk about your life up to the point where you entered the entrepreneurial world, right? So far, but that already comes with a lot of baggage. So although you've been very kind of cautious to be very kind about your parents, I think we also need to acknowledge that this doesn't go without. It leaves traces, right? It does. Bruises you, right? So when you were going through this period, and I remember when we had a prep conversation, I took a note of you said, and then I started saying no. Yes. So how does it feel to go through that when you know that you're not happy, you know that you don't agree with the shackles that you have, the limitations that have been imposed on you and the expectations? Were you aware at the time, even before you started being in the startup world, both with Kareem and everything else, that you were actually going through all sorts of mental health challenges?
I wasn't. It took me a while to realize that I was going through mental health challenges. Regardless of how, life was, I was always a very happy person. I was also always a very, optimistic person. I have a lot of energy, and that energy comes off when I'm talking, and suddenly I felt like the energy drain out of me. So I think it was after I lost my job at this, finance company, like investment bank that I was at. And between that and the time that I found what I wanted to do was a good year and a half. So I did odd jobs here and there, and then finally figured out what I wanted to do and stuck to it. There's a lot of constant challenge. I was at home. I would hear all sorts of things like, why aren't you applying? Why aren't you doing this? Why were you singled out as the person who was let go? Because not everyone was let go. So I started rebelling, and rebelling was, I hate saying it, but I was rude, And so here's the circle, right? You understand that what they're saying is wrong. So you want to say something to them. You say it politely. They don't quite listen. And then you're rude. And once you're rude, you see that they're hurt. So of course you love them. So you're hurt. Then there's guilt. So there's guilt. There's also, okay, I want to live my life my way. Okay, I can't live my life my way. It's a vicious circle of what can I do? And you're at home. And so I don't quite know how to explain it, but there was a point in time when I was in bed for, I think, 5-6 days straight. I did not want to get up. I did not want to see anyone. And so I got up one day. I, went to work, and I was a zombie. Honestly speaking, there was so much conflict, because I remember I would sit in the shower. If I did shower, by the way, for 5 days, I didn't even shower. That's how you know. If you don't feel like showering for days on end and getting out of bed or brushing your hair or your teeth, you should know. But I would sit for hours in bed, and I would start in the day, and it would be night. I would just be thinking, I'd say this to this person, I'd say this to this person. This is what I'd like to say to my parents. This is what I'd like to say to my brother. On and on and on. And I had these great points. And then when I'd come in front of them, I'd be like, if I say it, I'd hurt them, and disrespecting your parents is not the right thing. And that is not to say that after a few days, I did say a lot of hurtful things to my parents. I acted in a lot of hurtful ways. And eventually, at one point in time, it was getting difficult. So I up and moved out of my parents' house. I remember my mom saying that, after you left, this is much later, he couldn't sleep for days on end, thinking that, I live in the same city, we're in Dubai, she's in Dubai, why is she moved to another house? And all the meanwhile, I'd gotten into a job and I was performing well at the job. But I started marrying myself to the job. So I would spend, if you talk to anyone, during Kareem, my first few months at Kareem, first year at Kareem, I'd spend 22 hours at Kareem. And then I'd go back. So I would try not to focus on that. And literally the 2 years that I lived away from my parents, I'd already lived away from my parents. So it was always going to be a struggle coming and moving back in, because I was in boarding school, then I was in the US. So coming back was going to be a challenge, but I did come back, and Dubai is really different. And I really wanted to go out there. I wanted to party. I wanted to maybe date. I don't say it publicly a lot, but, I'd started dating for the first time in my life. Oh, by the way, I wasn't allowed to date, because in our culture, it's not okay to date. And if you have to date, you have to date in secret. And I was just like, I've had enough. By the time I was dating, actually, I was 27. For the love of God, who waits till they're 27 to start dating? Right? I did, because I wanted to be so here's the thing. I wanted to be the good girl for my parents, but I also wanted to be myself for myself. And so for the longest time, this internal struggle went on, and it went on quite a lot. It resulted in me moving out of my parents' house. And that, I think, hurt my father more than anything. And our relationship was never the same. We were okay on the surface. But that's also when I decided that I moved out. So whatever time I wasn't spending at work, I was spending with the therapist, which a lot of people don't know. Now they know, to figure out what's going on.
So Fatima, it's very interesting, because it seems like, so on the surface, you were doing some decisions that seem like you had, to some level, your life in control. You moved out of your parents, you thought about getting a job that you actually liked and enjoyed and was sort of in line with your strengths, and you joined Kareem and stuff. But deeper down, there is this big conflict that you are describing, and there's this happiness and the showers and the thinking, and now therapy. So I was wondering, as you are going through this period that seems difficult, seems heavy, I can sort of feel it. It's sitting in sort of at the bottom of my stomach right now. So were you alone on all of this to cope with this? Was there anybody, whether
No.
that therapist? No.
Just a therapist. So
there was a therapist. Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that, about the journey to enter. Yeah. To therapy.
I'll tell you about the therapist. But if you talk to people and ask them, how was Fatma during the first few years of Kareem, they describe me as the most amazingly fun person, the one person that was always ready to party, the one person that was life of the party. So I was putting up that face. Plus I was working. Plus I was spending miserable nights at home, always thinking about, like, I cannot tell you how many times I thought about what my dad must be going through, what my mother must be going through. Why did I move out? This conflict, oh my God, I can feel it right now. It was horrible. And no, like, I remember I was even dating somebody at that point in time, because, okay, obviously, like, I'm cool now. My parents don't control me. I'm going to date. That didn't work out too well, because, once, I think you need to be satisfied and easy in yourself, and you realize that you can't blame your parents for everything. And I think it was very easy for me to, once things started going well, or I was feeling a conflict, I started either blaming my parents, my family, my upbringing, everything. And part of it is there. But I think we all forget that this is a clinical disease. And so maybe things were going well. If you ask anyone else, they'll say things were going very well for her. And the reason why I saw a therapist, I remember there was this woman at work, Turkish woman, amazing. And I stood in a meeting once and I said, it was my, I think 7-month anniversary at Kareem. And I said, you know what? Kareem saved me. I am eternally grateful for Kareem for being like my savior. And like, I am so happy here. She pulled me aside and she's like, what do you mean Kareem saved you? I was like, I felt like I was drowning and Kareem saved me. And she's like, why are you saying this in a meeting? Like, we're all managers. You're saying this in the manager's meeting. Why are you showing yourself to be so weak? I'm like, no, I'm just paying a compliment. She's like, no, you're not. Anything that is personal, feeling worthy, you're feeling something, find a therapist, go to a therapist, talk to a therapist. Do not bring your feelings at work. Don't give anyone any credit. You do great work here. Take credit for your work. Don't thank Kareem. And then she handed me the number of, a couple of therapists. And she said she uses one regularly because that's the only way she stays sane. And so I went to one.
Did you have doubts, or was that a natural for you to like, okay, you just got it and explore the options?
She really pushed. She was just like, did you go? Did you go? Did you go? And I thought, why not? And, I also had like, I had some, medical issues where I was like gaining all this weight and I didn't quite know why. So I went to like a doctor. They did, a couple of tests. And then she also recommended that I go to a therapist. Mm-hmm. I don't know what she saw. So, yeah. I went to one then.
Did you find that an easy conversation to start?
No. I spent a lot of time. She kept telling me that you're faking this conversation, so have a real conversation with me. Faking this conversation, have a real conversation with me. Tell me what you really feel. And, certain things that she got to eventually were really, really good. And I think therapy helps in the sense that it helps you understand and see what you're looking for, but the real work is still yourself. You have to pull yourself out. You have to do the work. You have to believe that what are like these voices in your head, how to control them. So I would recommend therapy for anyone, or like, some tests if you're feeling a certain way, but just remember only you yourself can pull yourself out. It's like, I talk about this relationship that I was in. It's a dead relationship, right? Everyone from the outside could see that it wasn't going to work. Everyone, and you've got some good friends. I'll say I've had some really good friends. I didn't really talk to them about my depression because, again, depression back then, this is 2013, 14, 15. Still a taboo. It wasn't the in thing, so people wouldn't talk about it. And again, if I talked about mental health or like depression, I would be told there's no such thing. At least like in our family or stuff, they say there's no such thing, and they still talk about it not being a thing. It is not a thing. It is just a cry for attention. This very openly, people in my family, other families in this country generally say. I forgot what I was talking about.
You said something powerful about that I want to ask you about, because you said, yes, you can use therapy, but at the end of the day, it is the work that you have to do with yourself, yes. Right? But I want to ask you, because I think for a lot of people who are listening to us, this can feel overwhelming, because I even imagine myself sitting within it and not really knowing what tools to use or what the options are. I might want to have the will or some sort of intention that I want to work on it. But I think, let's put it as a question to you. So when you say like you have to do the work on yourself, what does that mean for you? What have you done that helped?
Okay. So I looked at what I was doing on a daily basis, right? Like I felt like I was a zombie walking through life, like not doing anything. So here's what my schedule would be. I'd wake up whenever I'd wake up, and I'd go to work, and I'd throw myself in work, and I'd stay at work, and that's when I started smoking. I still haven't been able to give up. That's one thing that I really wish I could give up. I'm like a freaking chain smoker. So And it's really bad because like, if that one thing I could give up, I would feel like nobody can control me. But right now, this addiction to smoking really controls me. And I don't like to give up control. So I would go to work, come back, get in bed, and that would be my day. So here's how I started. I started setting small goals for myself. I said, okay, tomorrow I'm going to come back from work and go for a walk. Okay, fine, I did a walk. Now, tomorrow, when somebody invites me, I'm not going to make an excuse of work, and I'm going to go out for that, 20-minute coffee, 30-minute coffee. I would set weekly goals for myself. This week is my walk week. I'm going to get out of the house apart from this. Then I would set up, I'm going to cut down on the work and maybe go to the gym. The gym really helps. Like any kind of physical activity really helps. I like gained tons and tons of weight. I was triple my actual size anyway. And I would make sure that I'd give myself really little goals every day and then start following them. And if I couldn't do them, I'd actually, cut myself some slack. One of the things that you'll hear from a lot of people about me is I'm very hard on myself. I am extremely critical of myself. And I think that also is another thing that goes back to your childhood. And I think that's what people need to understand, parents that are listening to me, anyone that's listening to me. If we got bad grades, it wasn't good. I was terrified of getting bad grades because the one thing that you had to get in my household was good grades. They didn't really care for anything else. If I came second, I was very athletic. They'd be like, it's second, it's not first place. I'd come home and my mother would be like, everyone else's hair is in place. What is wrong with your hair? If a teacher got mad at me and I said, hey, it's not fair, the teacher got mad at me, it was never the teacher's fault. It was always, you must have done something. And I think in a way, what I understand from parenting of other people, because other people went through this as well, is they don't want to spoil you, but you become really critical of yourself. I remember I'm just learning to play polo and I'm taking some coaching. So I, have to hit like 80, 90 shots in a session. So I'll hit 90 good shots, but I'll focus on the 10 bad shots. I wrote this post about leaving Dukan, which was my entrepreneurial endeavor. There were 463 comments. I'll give you exact numbers. There was 463 comments. 3 of those comments talked bad about me. I still can get those 3 comments bad. I can only focus on the negative, and I don't know how to. So these are some of the bad habits that I can get rid of, right? And I know, I'm conscious. At least I know that there is something wrong. Why cannot I focus on the positive? And then you think of imposter syndrome and you think of everything. But what my therapist did was she tried to link everything to like how I was raised. And that just, and I don't want it to be always like that. I think also like, I don't like compliments. I don't believe, like if you say something to me and say, oh, you're so good at this, I'll be like, he. In my head, I'm like, oh, she's just saying this because she needs something from me. Oh, she's just saying this because this is a polite way to have a conversation. These voices in my head. But I'm in a better place now. So if I hear these voices in my head, I can have that conversation. But the voices at that point in time were awful. I had some amazing friends that I pushed away. I pushed everyone away. I would push everyone away. I would just make up these scenarios in my head. I wouldn't even make them. They would be made in my head. Oh, they're making fun of you. Oh, they want this from you. And I'd just push everyone away. And so I started saying, okay, when somebody reaches out to you, Fatima, you're going to listen to them and you're going to take time. If somebody messages you, you're going to reply to that message. Baby steps. It took 2 years for me to finally get back to me. But then I went to MIT. MIT is where I did a lot of self-healing. MIT gives you a life coach. They give you like a life coach for some sessions.
I didn't know that. That's really good.
It's incredible. That guy and I worked together. I think that also changed my life. And then I decided while I was at MIT that the crux of all of this was I was not happy in life because I did not have the relationship with my parents that I needed, and it was affecting a lot of other things, right? Like, so I decided to move back, work on my relationship, and now we're in a really good place. Like, my brother called me this morning and he's like, it's been like 4 months and like I haven't heard from either of you talking about each other. What's going on? Like, is this the new normal now? And I don't jinx it. This call came this morning. But yeah. Sorry.
It sounds like a very lonely period of time, Fatima,
Yes.
getting through all of this, right? And because of linking it also to what you were saying earlier about boarding school, it hurts just listening to you. There is also something there where, because you used the word guilt earlier, and you bring in different facets of something that I think people nowadays discuss under the bucket of shame, because all the work that Brené Brown's doing around shame is all about the stuff that we put on ourselves for whatever reason, right? When I started seeing a therapist 20 years ago for the first time, and I wanted to talk about something very specific, and it took 3 sessions until we talked about my mother. And I was looking at this woman going, how is this possible? How are we living the cliche? And she was like, you can take it, turn it, do whatever you want with it, but you can't walk away from the things that happened to you when you were younger. and it's wonderful to hear how you've learned to embrace and acknowledge what's happened without it necessarily controlling your feelings and your thinking. And people have different ways of managing that, right?
They do.
I mean,
or necessarily for like going deep and solving for it, right? I mean, we were talking about this in the Taras last time, that sometimes we feel that, you know what, it's enough. Like, I don't want to go again into the childhood and or feel like I need to blame more. And I think it's also moving away from that blame and really being sort of conscious of what has happened, trying to understand, and then moving on. And I think that does come through you, Fatima, right now, particularly when you were talking about the small habits, because they were much more future oriented. Like, I could see you literally standing in the middle and you were looking forward, not necessarily backwards.
I don't want to. I think that other stuff that I don't feel comfortable talking about, which happens to a lot of people, which like some form of abuse that's happened. And, you know, for the longest time, I didn't talk about it. And I finally talked to my parents about it. And, you know, that also helped. I said that could possibly explain why I am a certain way. But I always think, whenever I'm having this conversation with my parents, or I'm having it with a friend, or I'm having it with somebody, in the past, it was always like, I'm sorry I'm this way. Maybe it's because of this, or maybe it's because of this. And it was never like, you're like this. You doing this upset me. You doing this upset me. And that's another thing I started doing. I started not apologizing for feeling a certain way when somebody said something. You cannot say something to me, and I say this again and again, you cannot say something to me and then also dictate how I feel about it. I get to choose how I feel about it. And it might seem illogical to you, but it is how I feel. So I started letting my feelings come in, and I started I started talking about my feelings. I said, this hurt me. This embarrassed me. This did this to me. And I have to accept it. I can't change who I am. I can make small changes, but at the end of the day, I'm a human being. And so there's only so much I can take. If you keep telling me how my actions have made you feel, and I'm supposed to apologize and amend, it's not only one way, it's 2-way. So I lost a lot of people. I used to have a lot of friends. Because, you know, I still am. Honestly speaking, I still go into that mode where I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. But now I'm more like, you know, it's a 2-way street. I need to say it. I need to do it. And so I lost a few people in my life because of that. And honestly, they were meant to be lost if this is what's going to happen. But for the longest time, we suppress our emotions as well. So once I moved away from Kareem to MIT is the time I became who I am. Because I was like, okay, because Mudassar, everyone was like, leaving Kareem is such a wrong thing to do. You have such a good position. I said, I'm not happy anymore. I need more. And I want to get an MBA. And I went and did my MBA. And after that, it was all I wanted.
Finally, what Fatima wanted. You know, I'm cheering you. Seriously.
At 38.
Doesn't matter. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't want to say. Probably does matter to you. It was a bloody cry to say, like, it doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, finding yourself at any age.
Fatima, can we talk a little bit about this, though? Because I think this is also relevant to the people who listen to this because they're interested in the entrepreneurial journey, right? So you had your startup experience with Kareem. You went to MIT that had this life-changing kind of impact on you personally. And then you came back and you became much more of a startup person. So I'm curious to see how much of the stuff you processed is still coming through now that you're leading a business, that you're in the leadership of a business, that you have much more of what you wanted. But at the same time, it's a high pressured environment with all the challenges that we as entrepreneurs are experiencing. Are there traces of that mental health roller coaster still showing their face?
It comes in phases. One, I decided, so I went to MIT. After MIT, I went to Keep Truckin', and I was the head of Keep Truckin's Pakistan office. Brilliant company, brilliant people, but at some point in time, I felt like I'd done everything that I needed to, and I was no longer needed. And even though it was a great environment, I decided that was it. This is how much I was needed in this situation. And I think a lot of it was, again, my mental demons coming back, in the sense that, oh, you weren't included in that particular meeting, so maybe that means that they don't need you. And after I left, I realized that some of it was my own thinking, but also I was the only person in management in Pakistan, and the rest, everyone was in the US. So there was like a communication issue as well. But I felt like a little bit of my insecurities were coming back in at Keep Truckin', where if I wasn't included in certain meetings, I felt like, and that really, like, I feel like leaving Keep Truckin', I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was, it was the right thing to do. But I think my mental voices played more of a role than the actual reality. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate. And I think it was because Corona happened, we were all alone. I was in Islamabad alone. And I think it was very difficult. And nobody's ever heard me say this. So I hope nobody from Keep Truckin' is listening. But honestly,
it's very brave what you are saying, though. I mean, to say that, really, even in reflection, I'm thinking, to be aware to that level, to say that, I did a certain decision, but part of it was also because there were those voices, and I don't necessarily like all of those voices. I think it's a very brave thing to do. So kudos. I mean,
but anyway, so once I was deciding what to do after Keep Truckin', so I left Keep Truckin' without having an option. So one of the things that I don't like is, when I've made a decision, I don't like to, stay at that company, because mentally I'm checked out. So I don't think it's fair. And I don't know where this comes from. So whenever I've left a company, it's not because I've found something else. I've usually left and then found something else. So I've given myself enough cushion. And again, a little bit of privilege plays into this, where, if I were even now to leave a job and say, hey, Dad, I need a place to stay. Actually, I'm living at his house now because now I'm happy here. But he'd be available and he'd be willing to help out. So would my brother, because they're very supportive that way. So a little bit of privilege plays into that part, but I leave when I've decided, and I look for something later. I think I was really scared when COVID hit, because I thought, here we go. How am I going to combat this? I'm going to be alone in Islamabad, which is where I was living before, and not seeing anyone, not having anything. It'll be me and my thoughts. I give very limited time to me and my thoughts, because I think that's one of the ways I've heard of decided to curbing it. And so after that, like, as I was figuring out what to do next, my first entrepreneurial journey was, Dukan. And a lot of people said, oh, you're so good, you should really do this. We feel you can do it. But inside, I never felt like I could do it. I never felt like I could be a co-founder. I never felt that I could even get investors to invest in me. And even now, as I'm raising, or previously as well, as there was funding talks for Dukaan, people actually were willing to invest in me and are willing to invest in me. But even now, I'm like, why? What have I done? Like, when people say your story is inspirational, I don't see it. All I see is like heartbreak, hard work, voices, trauma, and that's what people don't see. And I think that's why it's so important. That's why I will spend as much time as you want talking about this, because from the outside, it looks like, oh, cool. She went from here to here to here. And I could tell you I was dying. So anyway, my first entrepreneurial journey, Dukaan, was because everyone at Careem was starting out their ventures. Everyone at Careem was getting funding. And that's the pitch that I got, that you could be so good. I didn't believe it. And I jumped headfirst into something that I did not research. Me and my co-founder didn't spend enough time together. I'm not an easy person to work with, nor is my co-founder. And, some people fit well together. We actually didn't. But I think the good thing about myself, this is the first thing I'm going to say that's good about myself, is I'd matured to a level where I knew that if something was not working, there was no need to try and drag it out and wait forever. So, a lot of people said to me, 4 months was too early for you to decide that it was working out or not. And I said, 4 months was way too late for me to decide, because I knew 2 months in that this was not going to work out. I knew, he knew, and it wasn't like a bad breakup. It was like a very mutual, this isn't working out. And, my last conversation, there were some tears on my part, and then there was laughter, and then there was hugging, and then there was like a very nice goodbye, because it really wasn't working out. And when I first decided, I was like, what would people say? I'm like, what would my parents say? Because my mother makes fun of me all the time. She says, Fatma cannot last at a job more than 2 years, because after 2 years, she's done. And I think that's not too bad a thing. In today's day and age, if I can do what I need to do in 2 years and move on, it's not like it's a relationship and people are going to call me what they call women who move on from guy to guy, which, by the way, is not a problem. Should be okay, because guys do it all the time as well. But you know what?
That's a different podcast, but an important issue to talk about. I hear you.
No, we don't talk about that. I have no experience. Yeah. I am very single.
But on a real note, so Fatima, when you look today, first of all, thank you for sharing all the depths in, being really naked, very raw. It comes through. So, I don't think this is one of the therapist conversation when she said that you fake it. So appreciate it. We appreciate it. I have this sort of probably a last question, because I'm looking on the time, and when you are, I think it's still interesting to look maybe a little bit more systemically or holistically on Pakistan and entrepreneurs and the startup ecosystem there. How are you looking at it today? How are you reading it with relationship to mental health? Give us some highlights and maybe what needs to be done.
Oh, man, I don't think so. I know a lot of the entrepreneurs that have raised, that are doing some great work, I would be even scared with the word mental health, because 90% of these are men, and mental health cannot affect men in Pakistan, because that is emotion, and men do not have any emotions. So I think I'm so blessed that I'm a girl, because as a girl, at least I can talk about my emotions. God forbid a guy gets on one of these podcasts, gets up and talks about mental health. He would be called.
You still feel is that prevalent?
Oh my God,
okay.
Yes. And I really wish, and I'm glad that you're doing this. I wish you do it with more people. I wish, you and I've talked about doing something about mental health. I wish we could do it, because it would benefit them so very much.
The one thing that you're probably really good at, or it's coming through as your strengths, because people are giving you that feedback, and the Charas and I will relate to that, is that you're able to create a safe space for people to open up. And I think, we probably need to also recognize that we need more of that on a little bit more of a, holistic or through the ecosystem sort of platform and way. so that more voices, share their experiences, and it becomes, as we say in Future Farm, normalized and destigmatized.
Farm normalized.
I do think that leading with vulnerability is something that I find very aspirational, and this is exactly what you're doing, right? By being vocal about what you are as a leader, as somebody who has a position in the ecosystem, right? And you've been on the podcast is just a testament to that. So I'm very grateful for that. So thank you very much, Fatima.
Guys, this is so much fun. I didn't even realize it was 7:10.
No, thank you. Thank you, Fatima. It was a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us next week to reflect and digest. You've been listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. To learn more about our work, sign up to our newsletter or visit thefuturefarm.co, where you can also apply to be a Naked guest. Naked is produced by Dan Turgel and edited by Catherine Dworkin. And remember, subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help share it with the world.